Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the question and answer session, you may press star 1 on your phone if you'd like to ask a question. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Ms. Earlene Dow. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon, everyone. In light of the recent transition to 100% telework, we are utilizing technology off-site to continue operations. We aim to minimize interruptions as much as possible, but we appreciate your patience if we experience any technical delays. Please utilize the chat features to notify us of issues should any arise, and we will do our best to address them. All webinars and Q&A sessions are recorded and will be accessible from the Census Academy's Webinars tab once the recording and transcript are available. Please go to www.census.gov/academy. And please save all questions to the end of the presentation. And thank you for your continued support of our outreach and education efforts. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the Local Employment Dynamics Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information Institute, welcome to the August LED webinar, Providing Perspective During COVID-19 Using Census Data, with our presenter, Cameron Macht. The COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented changes across all industries, but has also hit some sectors harder than others. In addition to new data coming out, data can provide useful perspective on who has been and will be more impacted by the economic changes. Minnesota's Labor Market Information Institute has used the U.S. Census Bureau's Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics, or LEHD data, to supplement information provided in a set of regional industry profiles, racial disparities reports, and other context-setting pieces, and are helping economic and workforce development partners prepare for and respond to the recovery. This presentation will also illustrate how LEHD data was used to create a Tableau visualization that displays race and ethnicity data in a useful manner. Cameron Macht is a Regional Analysis and Outreach Manager and is currently the Acting Assistant LMI Director at the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED for short. He supervises a team of 5 regional analysts that provide labor market information to support workforce and economic development efforts across the state, as well as 7 other analysts at DEED headquarters providing tools and research. He has over 15 years of experience working in DEED's LMI office and has a prior career practice in market research and economic development. He has a bachelor's degree in organizational management and marketing from the University of Minnesota, Duluth. With that, I welcome back a previously LED webinar presenter and workshop presenter, Cameron Macht.
Thank you, Earlene. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're all doing well. I just want to say thank you quick for the opportunity to present and to join with colleagues from across the country. I'm very happy to be here and really enjoy working with Earlene and the Census. So thank you, Earlene, for the invitation. The Census Bureau is such a valuable partner for our state labor market information office, and the data produced in partnership is extremely useful. It's awesome that there is so much data available to help people try and make sense of these difficult times when uncertainty seems to be the new normal. So as noted, my name is Cameron Macht. I'm the Regional Analysis and Outreach Manager for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, and I am also currently serving as the Acting Assistant LMI Director alongside our LMI Director, Oriane Casal. Oriane and our Commissioner, Steve Grove, have done a wonderful job of leading us through these challenging times. Now, I'm biased, of course, but I would say that the need for a clear understanding of economic data is always important, but right now it kind of feels different. These really are unprecedented times. Every source of data can be put together like a puzzle, helping to provide a clearer picture of the state of the economy. We need to analyze and understand the data in order to help not only react to changing conditions, but also to prepare for what comes next. These have been a difficult set of months in Minnesota in many ways. But Minnesota is strong, and we will get through this, and we will be better. Because of all the different ways that DEED works in our state's economy, we know that we're going to play a critical role in the months and perhaps years of rebuilding that lie ahead. It's going to take all of us working together, and it's going to stretch us to do more and to do better than we've ever had to before. So we were invited to talk about our data in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic because of the work we've been doing to provide economic information to our state. Like many of you, we've been extremely busy over the past 5 months due to the pandemic. The department that I work for also oversees the unemployment insurance program, does business and community development and financing, workforce development, and many more things. Our LMI office is just one small part of our agency, but we've probably never been so popular. If you're like me as an LMI person, we're usually the people at the conference that other people try to avoid talking to so they don't get dragged into some long, boring conversation about how labor force participation rates are calculated or something along those lines. But now it's been nice because it seems like everyone wants to know the nuance of the unemployment rate and how we calculate these different things. It's kind of been a media sensation for us. So it's been great to have people paying more attention, but it has also been challenging to answer all of the questions that come in, especially those that simply aren't answerable through data yet. Like all state LMI offices, we work in partnership with the Bureau of Labor Statistics to produce a set of useful employment and economic development or economic data. At our best, LMI is the foundation for smart, informed, market-responsive decision-making in economic and workforce development. But the fact is, almost all of our data is backward-facing. We publish our information with a time lag after receiving it from the people and businesses of our state. Now, this works great in normal times. We're able to help identify trends, target industries and occupations, and make projections for the future. We have strong partnerships with both economic and workforce development agencies across the state, and we help provide the information they need to make smart decisions. But the call for real-time data is increasing. In an economic environment where things can change week to week or even day to day, people want as much current data as possible. Well, that's great, and we've certainly been trying to move in that direction. It doesn't mean that all of the existing data that we already produce isn't useful anymore. Instead, like mentioned earlier, it can be used to provide more pieces of the puzzle. We just have to know how to fit them together. So probably our most well-known data set is the monthly unemployment rate. When released, this often makes the A section of the newspaper, and people follow it with great interest. In Minnesota, we had spent several years talking about the tight labor market we were experiencing in our state, and even the challenge of continuing to add jobs at the same pace in the face of slowing labor force growth in the future. Then in March, everything changed. The COVID-19 pandemic had taken hold, and by April, the U.S. unemployment rate spiked to 14.7%, and Minnesota's rate jumped to 8.7%, though that was actually still among the lowest rates in the U.S. overall. When the U.S. rate fell back a little to 13.3% in May of 2020, we climbed to 9.9%. Now, that surge in unemployment was completely unprecedented in our state's history. We had soared from about 90,000 unemployed workers in March to about 300,000 unemployed workers by May. In June, our rate was back down to 8.6%, and we had about 267,000 unemployed workers. Unfortunately, some of the limitations with the data collection were put on display as these numbers were released. The very specific definitions of employment and unemployment that are used in the local area unemployment statistics program, the small sample sizes for the surveys, and the time frame that the data actually represents, to name just a few. So while this is useful as an economic gauge, unemployment data comes out 3 weeks into each month for the previous month, and during this pandemic, we were seeing things changing significantly every day, which increased the calls for more real-time data. More recently, the U.S. unemployment rate dropped to 10.2% in July, and our July rate will actually be released tomorrow. One thing that is important to note, though, is we are starting to see a trend, though it's still pretty slight, of people starting to drop out of the labor force. And that can be due to being discouraged, not being able to find work, potentially staying home to care for children or to care for sick relatives, or maybe just deciding to retire out of the labor force for good. So we know we need to keep monitoring that trend in the next couple months. Like unemployment rate, our current employment statistics data also comes out 3 weeks into each month. And last month showed an over-the-year loss of about 275,000 jobs in comparison to June of 2019. That puts us in line with the U.S. change, though our recovery has been slightly slower. However, it's also important to point out that this job loss is, again, completely unprecedented in modern times. If you compare the year-over-year employment loss during this pandemic to even the Great Recession, it simply dwarfs any previous recession in terms of the scale and the speed in which it changed. But how bad is it? Well, it really depends on who you ask. First, it varies greatly by industry, by region, by occupation, and really it all comes down to the personal level. Even people who were laid off initially might say it wasn't so bad thanks to the $600 benefits pop-off. Of course, that program has now ended, and those who are still laid off or who have not been called back to work might be facing significant financial hardship in coming months. Others, especially small businesses, have been greatly impacted by the interruption, and many are going to struggle to get back to normal. Clearly, businesses in accommodation and food services and some sectors of retail have been hit especially hard, while other sectors like package delivery services or cleaning equipment manufacturers have probably never been busier. It really varies based on who you ask. We're struggling to help people make sense of all the significant economic changes and what it means for them. So this stuff is confusing, right? It can be a challenge to explain the differences in the data sets, even to heavy users. For starters, the estimated number of unemployed workers and the unemployment rate are distinct from the number of people applying for or currently receiving benefits through the unemployment insurance program. As the pandemic spread and our leaders put stay-at-home orders in place, our economic situation changed rapidly. Much of our monthly data for March had been collected before the stay-at-home orders were enacted, which put us at a disadvantage for being able to provide useful information on the unemployment rate in the short term. March's unemployment rate doesn't come out until 3 weeks into April and didn't include much of the shutdown effects. April's rate didn't come out until the third week of May, meaning that the first time we were able to provide data on the change was nearly 2 months removed from the start of the pandemic response. Our stakeholders needed help to put our current economic situation into perspective, but the tools that we normally rely on, like unemployment rates and current employment statistics, the quarterly census of employment and wages, our job vacancy survey, for example, don't offer the types of real-time insights that were needed. So one tool that was typically overlooked is unemployment insurance statistics, and it suddenly became a very useful and popular data set since we were able to provide updates every week and even every day on the number of new UI applications. Our existing tool gets updated every month, like Laos and CES, usually 3 weeks into the following month. July's data is going to be released later this week. It is presented as a table with a yearly change percentage included and has breakdowns for industries, occupations, age, gender, and race. We have used this data successfully in the past, especially during the Great Recession, but more recently it was not making the cut in our presentations or reports. And while people can download data from the tool, it was not very gripping or easy to use. It made sense and looked great to us, but it was confusing to outsiders. So it was mostly left for the analysts, and over the past decade during the recovery and the expansion, we really didn't use it much either. We had a very tight labor market and our unemployment numbers were very low. So in the meantime, we needed to provide updates because we were getting dozens of media requests each day, and we needed to provide data to our partners and stakeholders, including state leaders, businesses, workforce development partners, economic development professionals, and more. We worked with our UI team to get access to the data and quickly built a Tableau Visualization that provides a count of cumulative UI applications that gets updated every day and also provides weekly updates with demographic details. It includes a map that shows cumulative applications by county as a share of their 2019 labor force. Especially at the outset, this was incredibly valuable in showing which counties have been hit hardest by pandemic-related layoffs and shutdowns. Different parts of the state were impacted in different ways, and this tool helps us provide insight into that dynamic. The tool includes 4 main tabs. The first tab covers demographic details for the state, all 6 planning regions, and major cities like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth. Users can find data separated by week by age group, education level, gender, veteran status, and race and ethnicity. It's important to note that this data is self-reported by the people filing the applications, making it very useful in understanding who is being affected and who is going to need help in recovery and reemployment. The Twin Cities is home to more than 60% of the state's jobs and has accounted for the majority of the UI applications filed so far as well. But every region has different characteristics that we can point out to our partners. The Occupations tab provides a cumulative count of applications filed by occupational group. Not surprisingly, the largest number of applications so far has been filed by food and beverage serving workers, retail sales workers, and cooks and food prep workers, which is pretty unique to this situation, as well as construction workers and production occupations, which typically make up a large concentration of claims. The tool allows us to see which occupations were hit hardest initially and which are seeing upticks in layoff activity as the economic fallout from the pandemic continues on. While claims for food prep workers have dropped in recent weeks, claims for health diagnosing and treating practitioners have been holding steady and even increasing in some regions in the state over the past month. We are able to quickly identify and point these details out so our partners know how to respond. Finally, we have included a county details tab to provide additional information for our stakeholders at the local level. This includes the same demographic details and also provides occupational detail, though there is a minimum of 10 UI applications in each cell in order for disclosure. This county level data will no doubt be helpful to our workforce development partners moving forward. In addition, our regional analysis team created a variety of visualizations to help show the impacts across the state. This includes a tool that gets updated once per week to provide UI applications as a % of total employment and total labor force, and also identifies where new layoff activity is picking up by looking at the increase in UI applications by week. While the Twin Cities has most of the UI activity, counties in Northeast and Northwest Minnesota that have a strong reliance on leisure and hospitality were hit hardest initially. Several counties have had more than 1/3 or even over a half of their labor force filing UI applications so far. In contrast, the southwest part of our state has been much less affected by layoffs due to a stronger concentration of employment in agriculture and manufacturing and a smaller reliance on leisure and hospitality. That being said, counties that had food manufacturers that were shut down saw brief spikes in unemployment activity, but have since reopened. At a more local level, we wanted to prepare our workforce development partners for the coming wave of unemployed and dislocated workers. Using the UI data, we identified the industries that were hardest hit and created industry profiles at the local levels to give our boards the information they need to understand the size and the scope of these layoffs and a profile of who they will likely be working with to find new jobs in the recovery. While the first part of the reports focus on QCEW and non-employer statistics data to show the number of firms and the number of workers in the industry and how many might be affected, the second part of the report was designed to give a deeper look at who these workers are. The Census Bureau's quarterly workforce indicators data set was extremely valuable in providing detail on workforce demographics, including the age, gender, race, and ethnicity, and educational attainment of the workforce in each of these affected industries. Each of these reports were then customized for the local areas and shared with the directors and the staff and job counselors to get them ready for the wave of dislocated workers that might be coming in. There are multiple ways to get at this data. The easiest is the QWI Explorer Tool on the LEHD website. We have a direct link from our D Data Tools website, and a lot of other state LMI offices have the same. You can use the information from the QWI Explorer to create different reports and analysis. We use it all the time. The tool is relatively easy to use, allowing for lots of filtering to get to the specific data needed. For example, on the QWI Explorer tool, you can select a more specific geography, including the state, counties, metro areas, or workforce service areas. Areas within these geographies can easily be combined within the tool to create regions. This is important in Minnesota because we separate geographies many different ways, including economic development regions, planning regions, initiative foundation regions, and more. So in my example, I combined 2 WSAs to get a region we call Central Minnesota. Second, you can also drill down into the 2-digit, 3-digit, and 4-digit NAICS codes. This becomes more important as more precision is required. For example, overall, manufacturing in Minnesota is doing okay. While some sectors, such as machine shops and wood product manufacturing, have lost jobs, other subsectors, such as medical device manufacturing and measuring and control instruments manufacturing, have been growing and adding jobs. We can look at demographic details in those specific sectors to see who's likely impacted. Likewise, in retail trade, jobs are down at motor vehicle dealerships, but up at building supply stores and general merchandise stores. Or in transportation and warehousing, jobs are holding steady for truck transportation, but are way up for delivery services and couriers and messengers. We can look at the specific workforce demographics for each of these subsectors to provide more insight to job counselors and other workforce development partners. Through the QWI Explorer Tool, you can also drill down into workforce demographics, so sex, age, education, race, or ethnicity. And you can also select different indicators such as turnover rate or earnings. Moving forward, these data will be very insightful. You can look at hires and separations. Though this information is not real time and it has a time lag before it is published, it still provides lots of useful insight that can be used to put the puzzle together. Providing workforce demographics at a more detailed level can be incredibly helpful for our workforce development partners. Providing gender data or age data or educational data can provide insights into how to help displaced workers get back into the labor force as quickly and as smartly as possible. Even more importantly, DEED is committed to radically increasing DEED's economic impact for individuals and businesses that face systemic barriers to growth. We want to galvanize an inclusive economic recovery that advances Minnesota's labor market, businesses, and communities for the future Minnesota economy. That means being aware of the disparities that exist in the state, calling them out, and trying to figure out how to make them better. To that end, we had also built a set of racial disparities reports for the regions using data from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey, as well as QWI. The first pages focus on population composition and change, things like educational and attainment by race and origin, labor force status, including employment and unemployment by race and origin, and income and poverty data. All of these can be used to show the disparities in the state and areas that need to be focused on. But another part of the report is taken directly from QWI, looking at job changes over time, as well as the concentration of workers of other races and origins by industry. If we're going to be able to respond effectively, we need to know what the workforce in these affected industries looks like. The good news is the data shows clearly that workers of other races have been gaining employment in Minnesota in large numbers over the past 2 decades, though workers of other races still make up a relatively small share of total workers in the state. Certain industries, most notably healthcare and social assistance, accommodation and food services, public administration, retail trade, manufacturing, and administrative support and waste management services, have all seen huge gains in hiring of workers of other races over time. Unfortunately, these are also the industries that have been hit hard during this recession, and in many cases, layoff activity has hit workers of other races harder than whites. Some of this may be related to the idea of last in, first out. If they've been hired most recently, they might be the first ones to be laid off. But this has also reopened and even widened the disparities that were already apparent in our state. Also, as noted earlier, for those who have not been called back, it seems like continuing claims are higher for other races than for whites in Minnesota. This will likely lead to financial hardships that will be difficult to overcome if jobs don't come back evenly. This is a topic of constant conversation for our leaders, and this type of data is incredibly important. Another way to access the QWI data is through the LED extraction tool, which provides all of the data in an easily usable download, which can then be manipulated in Excel or put into Tableau, which I'll show an example of. The LED extraction tool allows you to select geographies. Again, you can select state, counties, metro areas, or workforce investment areas within the state. From there, you can select 2-digit, 3-digit, or 4-digit NAICS levels, or all at the same time. From there, you can select worker characteristics, including sex, age, education, or race and ethnicity. There are many options for data to download. So in my example here, I just grabbed employment counts and earnings, but you might be interested in the other options, including hires, turnover rates, separations, or more. Finally, you can select all of the quarters that are relevant to your analysis, going back as far as 1995, at least for Minnesota. I do believe it's different for other states. From there, you should always click on the checkbox for include labels, and then you can submit the request and download the file once it is created. I did just the 16 workforce service areas in Minnesota at the 2-digit NAICS code level and for workers by race and ethnicity for a time period between 1999 and 2019, and it created a 9-megabyte file. Well, that's pretty manageable. Some of them can get out of control in a hurry. In Minnesota, there are 87 counties, and if I was to do all 87 counties and all 3-digit industries and race and ethnicity, it can make for a pretty big file in a pretty big hurry. Now from there, we built a Tableau visualization to help create the charts that you saw in the earlier racial disparities profiles. This includes a tab showing employment trends, earnings trends by race, which again is a really big deal in Minnesota and can really be insightful when looking at the industry level. This detail is very relevant for our local partners and our local leaders. Likewise, we also used it to show a count of jobs by race in various industries, as we want to focus where we can have the most impact. Finally, it shows the share of workers by race by industry, and we use this in the profiles to show which industries have more workers of other races. While they haven't all been equally affected by the pandemic, all of these industries certainly have been affected in some way and will likely start to see secondary impacts moving forward. The ultimate goal for us is to help our workforce development partners react to and prepare for the work they will be doing in the next 5 months and beyond. In addition to the reports we've created and the virtual presentations we've done with our boards, we have also used all of this labor market data to create information on our careerforcemn.com website, where we communicate directly with job seekers. This has included in creating a list of the top 30 occupations in demand, which we update each month as new data comes in. For workers who have changed from a temporary layoff to a permanent layoff, this data may come in very handy. We're providing data that shows which occupations might have a surplus of workers due to layoffs versus occupations that have a shortage due to current hiring demand. We can also provide data to show how those occupations might be linked. For example, the customer service and listening skills that someone has gained as a waiter or waitress could potentially be repurposed for a job as a certified nursing assistant. On our site, we have focused on healthcare, transportation repair, production, and software developer occupations, just as an example. Internally, we've also been using the same list to identify occupations with a higher concentration of workers of other races and trying to identify jobs they have been laid off from versus jobs that are in demand now. DEED's Regional Analysis and Outreach Unit is available to help provide data to local partners to help them respond and react to changes in the local economy. This can include the unemployment data, the UI claims activity, and even our more traditional data sets that provide the size and scope of the industries in the local area. Our team is here to help serve the people of Minnesota. So even if the focus is currently on finding and using more real-time data, we've found that our existing data sets, especially quarterly workforce indicators and other data from the Census Bureau, are still extremely valuable. They provide detail and insight that can't be gained other ways. The key is putting the puzzle pieces together in a way that makes it understandable and actionable for our stakeholders. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you today. I hope that it was helpful and that you learned more about how we can use new and existing data sets to provide perspective during the COVID-19 pandemic. I encourage you to use these resources whenever you can. With that, I will hand it back to Erlene and try and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Cameron. Operator, we are ready for questions.
We will now begin our question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 from your phone, unmute your line, and record your name clearly when prompted. This is necessary to be placed in the queue. If you would like to withdraw your question, you may press *2. One moment as we wait for our first question.
Thank you, Shannon. And while we wait, please keep your questions pertaining to the presentation. All other questions regarding the 2020 census should be directed to 2020census.gov. And also, please keep your question to one question with one follow-up question. And while we wait, also, I have a couple questions for you too that came in the chat, Cameron. So
wonderful.
This is from Lacey. She asked, how do these numbers factor in those who are no longer seeking employment but yet still not employed?
So I believe you're referring to the unemployment rate data that gets released monthly. People respond to the current population survey, and they are asked if they are either actively participating in the labor force, so they either have a job or are actively seeking a job, or if they are not in the labor force. And what we've noticed is that we're starting to see a trend toward, although it's very slight at the moment, people who are starting to drop out of the labor force. So if they're responding to the survey by saying they aren't currently looking for work, either because they're staying home to care for children or for sick relatives, or if they're discouraged by what the job market looks like right now, or a lot of times we actually see people go back to college during recessionary periods if they've been laid off from one job and they think that they'd like to train into a different job. We typically see college enrollments go up, so that could be behind it as well.
Okay, great. Here's another question from Christy. How are you taking this real-time information into account to direct additional supplemental services, support, food, etc., to schools where this economic insecurity, homelessness, food insecurity, etc., will have real-time effects?
That's a great question, and we probably aren't as closely linked to schools as we would like to be, and they certainly have been relying heavily on data in terms of figuring out how to open up this fall. A lot of times the information gets passed along through our workforce development partners along to the schools. I know in the state of Minnesota, the governor has a cabinet. There's a commissioner of education that's also meeting in the same meetings with our commissioner of employment and economic development. So information is being passed along that way. But a lot of times the workforce development boards are our primary conduit because they have to have education partners on that board. And so we would be able to provide that type of information through the boards to them. We have as a labor market information office, we don't always have information on food shortages or other socioeconomic hardships that people might be coming across, like evictions or things along those lines. So, our data is just one piece of that overall puzzle that they would be looking at. But we certainly would provide whatever they're asking for or looking for.
Here's another. This is from Stephen. The first one is just a compliment. This is great. We policy work stat jockeys love this detail. And then he says, for Oklahoma, use a cumulative UI number needs more attention. And we are looking for ways to show that extra $600 brought people to higher than usual income, but only because they were in the lowest wage jobs to start with, for example, food services. So I think that was more of a comment. And then Melinda, in developing the dashboard, were there any kind of user testing, or how did the designers decide which visualization types to use the best to help your users?
That's a great question. We do, essentially, we get questions from stakeholders and then try and build tools that will answer those questions for them. But, you know, we are not graphic designers by trade, so there probably are ways that it could be more aesthetically pleasing. We do always share the tools once they're created with users, and if we get feedback on things that we can improve, we always try and incorporate those as quickly as possible. But there is always a learning curve on creating Tableau visualizations that work for people. It might make intuitive sense to us. It might not make intuitive sense to our outside users.
Great. And then we have one more question before we go to the phones. Hi, Cameron. Under demographics, did you look at UI also by marital status, married, single, head of household, and younger kids or school-age kids? Example, impact on families with kids versus UI recipients without kids.
Unfortunately, our UI applicant data does not include marital status or whether or not they have children in the home. So that's actually a perfectly good example, though, of how we would try and fill in that data using what we know from the Census Bureau. So we've done a couple different reports using data from the American Community Survey, looking at what percentage of households in the state have a dual income where both parents are in the labor force, or if it's a single parent home, if that parent is in the labor force, just to give an idea of how big of an impact it has on childcare and people attending school in the fall. So that's actually a great example of how we have to use existing data to supplement the real-time data that's coming in.
Shannon, are there any calls on the phone?
We have one question in the queue from Mr. Perry. Your line is now open.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I do have a question. You're using Tableau, and Tableau has the ability of doing real-time data. Are you using any real-time data when you're creating these?
Well, Tableau is just one software option. There are others out there, like Microsoft Power BI or Google Data Studio, or I'm sure there's other ones, R. I'm sure there's other ones beyond that as well. But we use Tableau both for existing data sets and for real-time data. So we've used it to create the cumulative UI applications that get updated on a daily basis. And we've also used Tableau to visualize like the quarterly data that comes from quarterly census of employment and wages, or the monthly continuing claims data that comes out. So we use it for both.
Thank you.
Yep.
Our next question comes from Omar Heffel. Your line is now open.
Yes, I want to ask, will you employ one of your tools to display the current number of deaths in Wake County, North Carolina due to COVID-19?
That might be available through the state of North Carolina's Department of Health, but I'm only located in Minnesota, so I wouldn't be able to create that for you.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Our next question comes from Ashley. Your line is now open.
Hi, Cameron. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for this. I work in LMI, but I'm a population analyst on behalf of the Census Bureau. So this was especially useful for me because we look at, where workforce trends intersect demographics. I was wondering if you could provide the link to your dashboard because I wanted to look at it in further detail.
Yep, the links to the different tools that I talked about will be clickable links within the presentation, and I believe that will be posted. I'll hand that to Erlene, but I believe that will be posted on the Census Academy website.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, my contact information is shown on this screen, so you can just send me an email and I can email it back to you right away.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you could just tell. I was on the website right here, deed/data, and I wasn't sure if it was just directly to the dashboard.
Yeah, some of the dashboards we've created, they aren't officially data tools, so they aren't listed on the data tools page, but I can give you the direct link to them.
Thank you.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1 from your phone, unmute your line, and record your name clearly when prompted, as this is necessary to get into the queue for questioning. If you'd like to withdraw your question, please press star 2. One moment as we wait for additional questions.
Cameron, I have a couple questions. So
Sure.
This is from James. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Has anyone outside your group adapted your TWBox workbook to fit other state data sets? Any lessons learned?
Boy, I'm not sure if I understand that. Can you ask that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. Has anyone outside of your group adapted your, I don't know if it's TWBX workbook to fit other state data sets? Any lessons learned?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I know internally our group of analysts, the people who are using Tableau, will just download the workbook and can modify it for their own needs. But I haven't heard of other agencies, at least at the current point, or other states just downloading our workbooks and then changing them for their own needs. They certainly are welcome to do that. We wouldn't, and we'd be happy to be a resource if anybody had additional questions about how to create something similar for themselves. But I'm not aware of it.
Have you found, I'm sorry, this is from Edwards, have you found the changes in delivery worker employment useful in understanding rapidly increasing e-commerce activity during the pandemic?
Yeah, so we have been gathering data from a lot of different sources. One of the areas we've been using data from is the Minnesota Department of Revenue, which provides gross sales and use tax statistics for different industries. And we've actually seen an uptick in retail sales during the early portion of this COVID-19 pandemic. And the theory behind it is there's been a significant increase in online shopping. Unfortunately, we don't have the employment data to back that up yet. That should be coming with our second quarter 2020 QCEW release, which should be probably in the next 2 months here. But yeah, we're trying to find outside data sources to help provide insight into some of those trends like e-commerce. And it seems like that's going to be a part of Minnesota's economy moving forward as well. And so helping workers understand where the opportunities are shifting toward to help them get placed back into the economy as quickly as possible is part of our goal.
Great. Here's another question. How long did it take you and your staff to be able to efficiently use the Census software?
The quarterly workforce indicator, or the QWI Explorer Tool, that's something that we learn right away as we have new staff come on. We'll train them how to use that tool, and it typically doesn't take very long. It's a pretty easy tool to use. The LED extraction tool also seems to work pretty efficiently for us, especially when we're trying to build these Tableau visualizations of the data. Tableau actually takes a much longer time to learn than the Census tools. We've had good experience working with the tools. I think that they're laid out pretty intuitively.
Here's a question from Grace. Thank you. I wish you could show an example on what you just talked about, mixing UI data with census data on families with kids to better understand impact of child care access and school closure on employment.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I could share that with you as well. I don't have it included in this presentation, so I apologize for that. But it is a great example of how we're taking what we know from the real time and then supplementing it with the data that we do have available through American Community Survey. One of the challenges is a lot of times those are one-off requests that will come in. The commissioner or a stakeholder will ask that type of a question. And then, for us, it's kind of a scramble to pull the data together as quickly as possible and then respond. So I would say it's not in a formal report or presentation the same way as what I covered today, but it is data that we have provided upon request.
Another question, it's from Maria. I am watching regional industry profiles. I see it was created in response to COVID, but QCEW data is still not available for 2020. You show quarter 1 through quarter 3 of 2019. I wonder if it is to have a reference of how markets were where before COVID for those industries. Is that the case? Thanks.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a great point. So all of timing is everything in responding to these requests. There sometimes is data that gets requested one week and we don't have it, and then the following week we do have it. So in the case of these regional industry profiles, we actually started creating them in the middle of March, and at that point, fourth quarter 2019 data from QCEW hadn't even been released yet. By the time we continued creating more of these regional industry profiles into April and maybe even into May, but into April for sure. And by that time, fourth quarter 2019 data had been released, and so then we started using annual 2019 data for the industry profiles versus just first through third quarter. And now, actually, in Minnesota, the first quarter of 2020 QCEW data has been released. And so it may be a point where when second quarter 2020 QCEW data gets released in the next couple months, we may go back and revise all of these regional industry profiles for our local partners to say, here's what happened in those industries during that time frame between first quarter and second quarter. But yeah, it's always a timing issue, and with QCEW, you're always dealing with a time lag. There's about 4 to 5 months between when the data gets shared with us to when we actually publish online. But to your, so the end of the question, I think, was the idea then to just show the size of the industry within the region so that our partners would know, what's reasonable to expect in terms of the number of people getting laid off and coming in that are going to need services. And that was 100% what our goal was to try and just give people an idea of which industries are going to be impacted and how many people is that going to really affect. So in Minnesota, retail trade is a much bigger industry than personal care services. And a lot of people in personal services are actually self-employed. And so we had to include that information as well to just give people a better perspective on who's going to be coming in, who's going to need the services. And we've certainly followed up with our local boards, our workforce development partners, to provide additional detail after they've received these reports, because they might ask things like, well, what's the educational attainment for people who are likely to be laid off in this area? And does it make sense to get them into training in different areas if their jobs don't eventually come back? But great question.
I have one more question before we can go back to the phones to see if there are any more questions. This is from Roman, and he asks, do you have any suggestions on how local community economic development groups use the LMI stat?
Yeah, so that would be awesome if more local economic developers were using labor market information to help guide their decision making. Our state is fortunate enough to have 5 regional analysts stationed across the state, and they are out in local communities, not all headquartered at the state capitol. And I think that allows us to create real good networks and partnerships with them, so they know that if they have a question regarding, is their labor force still growing? How is their unemployment rate changing? How many unemployed workers are there? More local information on which industries are the largest employers within their communities and how they've been impacted during this time period. Commuting patterns to see, where people live versus where they work. That also is from the Census Bureau and is a great tool to provide to local economic developers. I think the key is for those local economic developers to reach out to their LMI offices and find out what's available to them. Each state is probably going to be a little bit different, but there's no, the best thing they can do is just create a relationship with a labor market analyst that can provide that type of detail for them.
I have no further questions in the queue. I did see a question regarding something about our COVID hub, so I put that into the chat. It's covid19.census.gov, if anybody wants to look that way. And then there is one more question that just came through. Anthony Hayden asked, how are demand occupations identified?
That's a great question, too. So we have been working, we have an analyst on staff that is working with the National Labor Exchange, which is providing us with daily and weekly and monthly job posting counts within the state of Minnesota. And so it's drawing directly from job banks like, in our state, it's called minnesotaworks.net. That's the state's online job posting database, but also drawing from employer websites. So it gives us a pretty complete count of the number of jobs that are currently posted. We do analysis on that and then compare it with data that we have from like our job vacancy survey, and that's how we create the list of demand occupations. And we do update it every month in order to make sure that we're sticking as real time as possible.
Great. Shannon, is there any calls on the phone?
Yes, we have a few questions in queue. Our next question comes from Michelle. Your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
So I actually, you already did ask and answer my question. It was about how long your staff, it took you to be able to use the Census software, and I got your answer about the Tableau. Was your staff already, you said it was pretty quick, I mean a couple of days, and you did training, you said you gave them training when they start. Where did you get that training?
So the training on like the QWI Explorer and the LED extraction tool is just something that I would walk each of the analysts through after they've started. And it's part of all of the data tools that we would cover. So we would maybe spend an hour or a couple hours walking through the QWI Explorer tool. And then, they're obviously expected to be using that tool and to be learning from that tool on the job. That being said, we've also been lucky enough to have Erlene join us for, we do a monthly conference call with all of the analysts, and she's come in and walked us through some of the Census tools as well. And I believe that there is Census staff who are willing to do that type of training, and if not, I believe there's also a lot of tutorials and training sessions available on the Census Bureau site. And I referred to Tableau. Yep, Tableau takes a lot longer to learn how to use.
Michelle, you can send me your email, and I'll send you my email.
Okay. Send. Who was that?
You can put it in the chat, and this is Erlene, and we can set up some kind of training.
Okay. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Sherry Waltz. Your line is now open.
Oh, hello?
Yes, ma'am, your line is open.
Okay. I just want to ask you, so do you have any links about the pandemic, the data, real-time line, the data available? Do you have the link, or just a general one link like COVID-19 as someone already typed on this on the chat?
Yes, Sherry, this is Erlene. I sent that link. It's the covid19.census.gov.
Okay. Another question about the Tableau. Are there a free Tableau, a free available online for the Tableau, the software?
I'm sorry, free software, you said?
Yeah, I mean the Tableau, the software. Are there training about the Tableau?
Yeah, so Tableau has a public data site that you can use. Otherwise, the software, you can purchase a license to use that software. I know R is available for free, and that's a really useful software package as well for doing data analysis. There's probably other software packages out there. I just happen to be most familiar with Tableau.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Ashley. Your line is now open.
Hi, Cameron. I'm just curious if you guys are a member of the website consortium. So in other words, is your LMI website hosted by Montana, or is it hosted by yourself?
It is. Yep, we host our own site.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Olga. Your line is now open.
Yes, my question is, can you hear me, Cameron?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a way to monitor the check on to check the data analysis, how quickly a person that's unemployed is actually back to work in this pandemic time?
We don't have that level of analysis yet. One of the clearest ways to see it, though, is in the number of continuing claims. Right. So those are people who are actually requesting and receiving weekly benefits payments from the UI program. And we've seen a substantial drop in the number of weekly benefits requests over the past month.
Okay.
So we're assuming that those people are going back to work.
Thank you.
Yep.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1. If you'd like to withdraw your question, please press star 2. One moment as we wait for additional questions.
Cameron, I have a couple. So, yep. Michael, your presentation was around county data, and many initiatives for inner city development are place-based, and concepts like TOC require an analysis at the block group level. Why is state not doing study at this scale? This is where we are working with our workforce development model in Los Angeles.
Sure. And we've done some analysis and sharing of data from UI applications and from continuing claims at the zip code level. Minnesota is probably not comparable to Los Angeles in terms of population density. So a lot of times in our analysis, county level data will meet the needs of the people that we're working with. But I certainly understand how in a metro area, the more detailed level of information is very necessary, because there can be significant differences even within the same city. I don't know well enough what California has available, but I would suggest reaching out to your labor market information office and seeing what level of detail they have for unemployment insurance applications or claims statistics. Hopefully that helps.
And then another question from Michelle. What was the other software that you mentioned in relation to Tableau?
So Microsoft has a product called Power BI. Google actually has a new free tool called Data Studio, although I haven't had any experience working with that, so I'm not entirely sure how it works or if it works. And then there's also a software program called R, which is just the letter R, which is a statistical analysis software that you can download for free. It's open source. And you can use that to create some visualizations as well.
Okay. Nothing in the chat. Any more on the phone, Shannon?
Currently, there are no questions in the queue.
Excellent. So I would like to take this time to thank Cameron and thank all of you for attending this webinar. Thank you, Cameron, for such a interesting presentation. Upon closing out of your webinar, please take a moment to complete the survey so we can better serve you in the future. And with that, I wish everyone a good day, and please join us next month on September 16 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when Patrick Flaherty presents Manufacturing Worker Age Profile and Implications for Earnings. Thank you all so much.
This concludes today's conference. All lines may disconnect at this time.